Hey everyone, welcome back to the Astro Thoughts podcast with Astro Boy. I know I've been missing for a minute, mostly because of work and, things are just really crazy and busy. Just been really busy with work, and every time I get home from work, I'm just tired. And then on my days off, I don't want to do anything besides play Call of Duty. But on another note, we're going to be talking about aliens today, and I want to talk about aliens because it's just something that I've always been interested in. I think since like 8th grade, I was always interested in aliens, always wanted to meet an alien. I would watch like YouTube videos about aliens and just, you guys probably already seen like all these documentaries that, like one of our US presidents met with an alien and all that. I was watching that type of stuff in 8th grade. Yeah, strange kid. But I guess I'll just share with you guys a couple of alien stories, I guess I'll share with you guys a couple of alien stories that I believe are very factual. There's tons of information on Google about aliens, but it's not, you can't really trust everything you read. So I'm just going to share with you guys some alien stories that I know for a fact is real, and I'll share that with you guys. So the first one is about a book I read, I'd say last year. I think it was last year I read this book. It's called Millennial Hospitality by Charles James Hall. Charles James Hall, he enlisted in the Air Force in 1964, and his position in the Air Force, he was a weather observer, and he was stationed in Nevada in the desert. And he had a bunch of encounters with aliens, and particularly he had an encounter with a certain kind of alien race. And so his job in the Air Force, he was supposed to go out into a range. And so there was 4 ranges that these weather observers had to be stationed at in Nevada. There was range 1, 2, 3, and 4. So range 1 was like, the one that it's still in the desert, but it's not as far out. And all the way up until range 4 is like the one that's farthest out into the desert. And, you're really remote and you're out in a shack and I think you're there for like days at a time in that shack, and you have to observe the weather out there. So imagine, being out in the desert, out in this range, all by yourself, observing the desert for days at a time. It could be a little scary. And where it got scary was there was a lot of people that reported seeing the same thing at nighttime. And they reported seeing a white horse glowing that had like this translucent glow to it running across the desert at night. And all these people got freaked out because, just didn't really look quite like a horse, but they said that's the closest thing they could describe. So later, Charles found out that these were actually aliens, and these were aliens that were living on that Air Force base secretly. Not really secretly. The U.S. government and that the Air Force knew about it. And they had like an agreement with it, but that's just where they were being stationed as well. And so he later found out that these aliens were called tall whites, and they're called tall whites because of their height and how pale their skin was. Charles said that they could pass as humans, but their eyes were twice as big as our eyes, and that their hair was like very, very thin and white, and very like kind of like transparent as well. So basically, like I said, they lived on that Nevada base, and they used that Nevada base as like a pit stop or rest area. And the U.S. government would supply them with food and shelter and any other like resources that they needed while they were on that base. And it was like really strange, like, it's like they were on that base, but the aliens also used that opportunity to teach like their kind about another alien race, which is basically us humans. So basically, these alien races are called the tall whites. They would be on this base, and they would travel across the desert at nighttime. And they knew that these weather observers would be at this remote base recording the weather. So they'd use that opportunity to observe and kind of stalk the humans. And they had kids along with them, and they would show the kids, what humans looked like. and the kids thought humans looked really weird and everything, and we smelled weird and everything. But let me see what other things I could talk about these tall whites. The other thing he also said was that these tall whites, they didn't really age. And instead of like showing age, like how us humans do, when we get to 70 years old or 60 or in our 60s, we look older. We don't look as young. But with these tall whites, they didn't show age like that. Instead of aging, they actually grew, and they lived 10 times longer than humans. And say, for example, once they reach like the age of 200, they would just grow, and they could get to like the height of 7 feet tall or 8 feet tall. And that's why, they get the name the tall whites. So imagine seeing something, that's like 7 feet tall, glowing in the nighttime, running across the desert. It could probably freak you out. And so it got to the point where a lot of these weather observers, they would stay in that little shack, or they would stay in their barracks and just make up the weather because they didn't want to go out into the range and see the tall white aliens. The other thing he said about them, that like I said, they brought their kids along with them, and they were really protective of their kids. And if their kids ever felt uncomfortable or scared in any way because of humans, they wouldn't hesitate to harm the humans. So, and it was, like I said, they were on that base because they had an agreement with the U.S. to basically be stationed there, and the U.S. would literally supply them with anything they needed while they were on that base. And I believe the U.S. also tried to exchange technology with the tall whites as well. Another fact about them, the aliens would stalk Charles, and they would see everything he did while he was out in that shack all alone. And one day the aliens noticed that Charles got an injury. He cut his cut and bruised somewhere on his body. And then they basically, he had an interaction with them later on, and they basically were like wondering how he healed so fast. And they were really fascinated about that because the tall whites, they did not have the same ability as humans to heal from injuries that quickly. And Charles later explained that one tall white got like a cut or something like that, and they literally had to go to the hospital. They had to be in an intensive care unit for that type of injury, where humans, we get a cut, we feel better, right after, but it takes maybe about a week for that cut to completely heal or something. As for the aliens, it took them in the intensive care unit to feel better. So that's that first story. There's tall whites. Like I said, there's a bunch of different types of aliens out there. The ones that I've read about, there's tall whites. There's ones called the Greys that everyone always knows. There's ones called the Norwegians. There's so many of them. The Nordics. You guys can all look them up. But from stories that I personally believe the most, I'm just going to share these ones with you. Next story is a story about Ingo Swann. Ingo Swann was a psychic who was very famous for remote viewing. And Ingo Swann was a part of a secret government project called Project Stargate. And a little backstory on Project Stargate. It was a project that was funded by the U.S. government in the 70s. And they invested $20 million into this project. And this project maybe lasted it lasted 20 years. So the first thing I say to people, if a project lasted 20 years, they most likely found substantial information that, what they were researching was useful. And because, it's really hard to get funding, and imagine how it is to get that type of funding and for it to last 20 years. They had to find some type of substantial information for the money to keep coming in. So Project Stargate, was started by the U.S. government, and basically the U.S. government got word that the Russians were basically using psychics as spies to basically infiltrate the U.S. and other countries and gain information. So basically the U.S. government didn't want to be late to the party. So they were like, you know what? we're gonna see if this is true. So basically, the U.S. government started Project Stargate and started recruiting people to be these psychic spies and see what they could do with psychics. So they tried everything from assassinating people using psychics to reading secret documents from other countries, spying on other countries to see what they're working on in labs. So basically, it got really with what they were doing with these psychics, and they were really successful with what they were doing. And one of the most well-known psychics is Ingo Swann. And so they were able to find out that people have the ability to remote view. And what remote view is, basically, you're able to project your consciousness to anywhere you literally want. You could project it to a different country. You can project it to another planet. You can project it to a different time period. You can even go into the past. You can go into the future. So once the U.S. government found out people had this ability, they then used this to as their advantage now. So one day, Ingo Swann, he was already well known by the CIA and the military for his ability. And so I believe it was the army, some army official, a military official, reached out to Ingo Swann for a secret mission. And this is all from Ingo Swann's book that he wrote, and I think the book was published in 1998. The name of the book is called Penetration, I believe. So I was reading that book, and in this book, he stated that he was approached by a military official to work on a secret mission for him, and he literally wasn't given any information about it. All the dude said was, "Do you accept? Yes or no? If you don't accept, just forget we had this conversation." So Ingo Swann was very hesitant and scared to accept it because he didn't know what he was walking into. But he then accepted because the military official said he would pay Ingo Swann $1,000 a day for each day he worked, and he would be supplied with a hotel to sleep in and everything. Anything he wanted, he would be given to him. So he accepted, and he had to drive. He had to take a train to New York to meet the man. And so they finally met, and the guy still didn't give Ingo Swann any information about what he would be doing. He just had to go along with it. And when the time came, he had to sit in the room with the gentleman, with the army guy, and he was given an envelope, and he had to open it up, and it was just coordinates. If you guys aren't familiar with what coordinates are, they're just basically numbers that basically tell you where a specific place is. It could be anywhere on Earth. It could be anywhere, say, for example, on another planet or something like that. So Ingo Swann was given these coordinates, and the army guy just told him just to start remote viewing and to go to that coordinate. So that's what he did. And so what Ingo Swann basically found out, well, I don't want to jump ahead. So basically, Ingo Swann remote viewed, and he noticed that he wasn't on Earth. He put two and two together. He knew he wasn't on Earth, and so that's how the first session went. And the next session that they did, Ingo Swann told the gentleman while he's remote viewing that he could see another individual or two individuals on the moon. And while he's remote viewing, he felt that the individuals could sense his presence, because the two individuals that were on the moon, they looked towards his direction. And now when you remote view, you don't project your whole body, you just project kind of your consciousness to that location. And so when he projected his consciousness to that location, whatever was on the moon at that time, they couldn't really see him, but they felt his presence. And Ingo Swann noticed that. He got really scared. So that's when, he basically put everything together and found out what this mission was all about. And the military guy basically kind of confessed to him, but, Ingo Swann did, have to pry the information out of him. And it was basically that the U.S. government went onto the moon, and I think they weren't really supposed to go there because, someone already kind of claimed it as their space and basically kind of kicked humans off of the moon, and they weren't supposed to come back. So what they were trying to do, they were trying to use Ingo Swann, a psychic remote viewer, to basically spy on these individuals and see what they were doing. And, the military got scared because they kind of found out that these individuals can sense the presence of other psychics. So they didn't really state what was on the moon. They didn't say what type of alien race it was. But, Ingo Swann basically said that, whatever was on the moon, they weren't humans. And that, they definitely, he said they weren't humans. They resembled humans, but they weren't humans. And they definitely have like this high psychic ability. They're psychically advanced. And they have these abilities that could talk to people telepathically and all that. But on another note too, while we're on this, Ingo Swann and like other remote viewers, they all stated, not just Ingo Swann, but like when the U.S. government started doing research on remote viewing and astral projection, they did come to the conclusion that everyone that's born has this ability to remote view. Everyone's born with these psychic abilities. It's just that you have to tap into it and, basically hone in onto these abilities. So basically, it's just practicing and figuring out, what your strengths and weaknesses are and just doing that. And there are like exercises you can do to basically develop your psychic abilities and to work on it. But yeah, like everyone has these abilities. Everyone astral projects every night. You too can travel to the moon or do whatever you want to do. Go on a vacation if you're too broke to, fly out and go somewhere like me. But yeah, so that was today's podcast on a little bit about aliens. If you guys have questions or any comments, please comment below. Comment below if there's any other topic you guys would want me to talk about, because a lot comes to my mind, but sometimes, I'm just like too busy or lazy to just do it. But yeah, thanks guys for joining me with joining Astro Boy on the Astral Thoughts podcast for today. Hope you guys have a great day and a great week. Peace.